Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we have a very special guest. We have Assemblymember James Ramos joining us. Assemblymember, how's it going? Thanks for joining the program.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Exciting to talk to you. Kind of wanted to go with, kind of into your background, your history, and kind of what brought you to Sacramento. Can you kind of give us a little background information on you and kind of your upbringing and kind of what led you here?
So I grew up on the Seminole Indian Reservation in Southern California near San Bernardino and Highland area. When I grew up on the Seminole Indian Reservation, we were probably the most poverty-stricken area in San Bernardino County. We went to local schools in our area. And so the journey to get here is just surreal. I mean, growing up in deep poverty, impoverished area, and then seeing how things have moved forward. I moved forward in my education attainment. I got my Bachelor of Science degree from Cal State University, San Bernardino, my master's degree in business administration from the University of Redlands. Then, I was on the tribal council for our people, the people of Santos Manuel, for many years, off and on for over 15 years, in different elected positions. Gaming commissioner when the gaming aspect of the economic development started to move forward. I was the tribe's first gaming commission chairman. Then I was elected to the tribal council within the business committee, and I was the tribe's first treasurer for our tribal government, having my accounting degree from Cal State University, San Bernardino, and then went and got my master's in business administration and became the chairman of the people of Santos Manuel for the Seminole tribal government. And it's there that when we were lobbying back in those days for compact negotiations, that I was first introduced into the legislative process here in Sacramento. And would always go back and tell our younger people and other tribal members during that time that one of us should be running for elected offices so we could sit in the seats here in the state legislature. And it took a while, right? We had to build our pedigree from the local level. I ran for the San Bernardino Community College Board of Trustees in 2005 and won that position. And I stayed on the Board of Trustees till 2012. And in 2012, I was successfully elected to the San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors. And along the way, I was appointed by the governor to the State Board of Education, becoming the first California Indian person, not only on the Community College Board of Trustees, but on the San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors. And for the first time, a California Indian person was appointed to the State Board of Education in 2011 through Governor Brown. I've served as the long-standing chairman of the Native American Heritage Commission, appointed there by two different governors within the state of California. And so building that pedigree allowed me to then, when something opened up in our area with the Assembly 40th District, and being frustrated somewhat with the different challenges at the local level, I decided to run for state assembly in 2018 and successfully won this position, becoming the first California Indian ever elected in the state's history to the state legislature.
That's an amazing background, amazing resume. Can you kind of turn back, I guess, to the time when you were involved kind of as the chairman of San Manuel and kind of up here lobbying? Kind of what years was that?
So those were years when we were fighting for our compacts. That was when Pete Wilson was governor during those times. We had the IGRA was created at the federal level, and said that Class 2 gaming was able to be done with tribes in the states that allow certain gaming to take place. Here in the state then was bingo and card clubs, right? Yeah. So anything beyond that needed a compact, a Class 3 compact. And it was that then Governor Pete Wilson refused to negotiate compacts with the tribal communities in the state of California. We went to the federal area. There, Bruce Babbitt was a Secretary of Interior, which hopefully we could get to, because right now trying to be confirmed in a full vote by the Senate floor in the federal Congress will be for the first time a Native American person, a female, Deb Haaland, who is up for that position. So it's interesting that back then we were calling on the Department of Interior Secretary Bruce Babbitt to invoke the bad faith negotiations here in the state of California. And Pete Wilson was the governor that refused to meet with tribal governments to move forward on compacts.
Can you kind of give us a sense of how tribal gaming has helped kind of revitalize, your tribe and helped, fund different aspects and, kind of reading your background and your history, it was quite impoverished growing up in a trailer and things like that. How has tribal gaming, I guess, helped your community and kind of bring them forward?
So the economic success of our individual tribe and many others in the state of California is a glimpse of a handful of tribes, because the majority of the California Indian tribes still live below the poverty level status and in need of basic infrastructure. So the success of one tribe does not paint a picture of what's happening throughout Indian country, even in the state of California, if not the nation. There still is a lot of need that's there. But early on, when bingo first came, we thought that it was going to be short-lived here on our reservation. We had overnight, we had to move, our family had to move from the only flat land that the reservation had across the street to make way for the bingo hall. And the democratic process that our tribal government follows is a full majority vote. So at one general council meeting, the majority of the people voted they needed that land, and those families had to move across the way. And our family was the one that had to move. And so they brought in the construction to create the bingo. And we were the workers. We were the ones working. We were the ones putting all this together. And then we were able to, from there, not immediately, but a little bit later, once we paid back the investment that first came through, the tribal government was able to establish a home loan program on our own, because you couldn't go to the banks outside of the reservation to get loans to build homes on the reservation. Wow. They wouldn't loan us any money. So we had to create our own program. And then that's where you started to see that home loan program within the tribal government, where individual members started to have better housing, better infrastructure throughout the reservation itself. So that was something that changed. Prior to that, my grandmother and my grandfather, during a flood, the road was washed out, and there was gas lines that were exposed, this and that. They got capped, and we had to call on the Bureau of Indian Affairs to come and help us to fix that road. And it took over 6 months for them to even respond, and another 8 months to do a temporary fix, meaning that my grandmother and my grandfather were isolated, right? So we had to carry food up to them during that time. It wasn't until later, when the tribe was able to have that economic diversity and success, that now we're able to repair those lines within 24 hours, following it through the tribal government itself.
Oh, so that's amazing. So basically the tribe is wholly self-sustaining on that land. They have to repair roads, power lines, things like that.
It definitely is. Self-sustaining. Another thing that and I know we're talking about Indian gaming, but during those discussions, those lobbying efforts, and the meetings that we had as tribal people to move forward with compact negotiations, that ultimately Gray Davis signed the first group of those compacts, was an opportunity to open the window of what truly was impacting California Indian people with education attainment, social issues that still plague many Indian country today, environmental, domestic violence, public safety that's been going on reservations in Indian communities. Indian gaming was supposed to be the area to open up that window so we could start to tackle those issues, issues of making sure that there was correct portrayal of what happened to the California Indian people in the state of California. The public safety component. I carried a bill last year on missing and murdered Native American women, and the governor signed it, and that was AB 3099. And so all these issues that have plagued and continue to plague Indian country, not only in the state of California, but throughout the nation, are issues that we're tackling while we sit in the seat here in the state legislature.
Yeah, it's a very, I guess, interesting year. A lot of things have been brought to the forefront. And kind of one of those things has been kind of, our history and things that we have statues of and that we're honoring that maybe we shouldn't. I know you've been outspoken on this about Junipero Serra, something, we've all learned here in California, 4th grade, we learn about California missions. We travel up and down the state, but they're always been kind of taught in kind of a manner that, that they were positive, that they were good things. What is, I guess, your take on this? And, I guess, do we need to change the way that we learn about our California history, and especially in terms of natives and the things that, we're honoring and celebrating with, statues and things like that?
I think the time is an opportune time for us to start that discussion, a discussion that in history has not been really addressed. When you talk about what has been taught, even myself growing up in schools, we were taught different things on the missionary system. We would come back and tell our parents, they would get upset and say, basically, you don't have to do that project. But yet the school in turn would chastise us for not doing the project, and we would get a bad grade. It's not until now that you see a state legislature with the diversity that it currently has under the leadership of our Speaker Rendon, to create this diversity, that we're able to have a voice that can lift up the voice of the California Indian people. When we talk about the Spanish missionary periods, it was far more destruction happened to the California Indian people under that rule, under Juan Pedro Serra, that inflicted these types of pains towards the California Indian people, that paved the way for the mental attributes of how Indian people were then looked upon. After the Spanish missionary system, you had the Mexican rule, you had the United States rule, and ultimately the state of California. But that mentality from the first impact from the Spanish missionary period carried through each one of those eras, and more infliction was put on the California Indian people. The mission system, we've had people from areas down south end up being way up here in Northern California because they were taken from different villages, Indian villages, and brought into the mission system, not freely, but to become that labor and that subservient to the missionary and to the padres within that structure, to build the missions, not freely. And there's documentation that when Indian people tried to leave, they were brought back and whipped and locked up. And it was bad towards the California Indian people. It's that history that has not been told. There's several books and scholars that are out there, Crossing the Thorns. There's a book called American Genocide by Benjamin Madley out of the UCLA School of History, that attributes all these different areas and solidifies and validates all these things that we're saying. This is the part of history that for over this period of times, this history has been able to be told without any mention of correcting that, of what truly happened to the people that were oppressed through these types of mentalities that were there. I think now with the state legislature and the people of the state of California and the diversity we have is something that's calling for the people that were once oppressed to let that voice be heard, to balance out the true history of the state of California. And my bill, AB 338, starts to set that mission in motion to make sure that history is being told. Here in the state capitol, I called on the local tribes from the Sacramento area to talk about the atrocities and genocide that happened here to the Miwok and the Nisenan people from this area, bringing it straight to the local government. These are the histories that needs to be told and talked about in our local schools. 3rd and 4th grade, when you learn about a local tribe in your area, let's learn about the good and the bad that happened. And in the 8th grade, when we learn about California history, we cannot learn about California's history unless we're willing to discuss the atrocities and genocide that happened to California's first people. And in the 11th grade, when we learn about governments, federal government, state government, local governments.
Mhm.
We should also be learning about a tribal government that outdates many of the cities that are now cities in the state of California. These are issues that we're continuing to push forward and advocating for. And being here in the year 2021, talking about these issues, being able to be the first California Indian person, and I'm Serrano and Cahuilla from my area, to be able to have that voice and to have the support of the state legislature in addressing these issues is something that I would have never thought of growing up on the San Manuel Indian Reservation, where I still reside. I still live on the San Manuel Indian Reservation.
No, that's amazing. This governor has been, very upfront with the Native American issues. He's apologized for past genocides, and he seems to be very active on this front. Have you, I guess, begin talking with the governor's office about, your bill and kind of, things that you seem hopeful that, it's going to see its way through?
Certainly. I think some of the early discussions, when I first got elected in 2018, in January, I think it was January, February in 2019, the governor moved forward with his executive order of apology to the California people for atrocities and genocide inflicted upon them from the state legislature, because the first governor, right, in the state of California put out bounties on the souls of Indian people. And that money was approved by the state legislature and reimbursed by the federal government. Wow. To go after California Indian people, to bring their souls and bring them back, right? And to get paid for doing that type of genocide and atrocities. It was there that we moved forward with the governor and started to tackle tough issues. One deals with repatriation of Native American remains. When we had an audit done by the auditor here in the state of California that has identified that just through a sample polling, that different areas, the UC system still houses over 500,000 Native American remains that have not been repatriated back to the Native American people for proper reburial. There's a problem there. So we looked and dove into that audit, and we've worked on a bill, AB 275, that for once brings the whole California Indian community together for the purpose of repatriation, to get those remains back into the arms, into the people, so they could conduct a rightful burial. Many of those remains that are still in those archives belong to California Indian tribes. Some of those remains belong to other tribes throughout the United States. But here in 2021, we're still talking about people holding in their archives remains, bones of our ancestors that need to be reburied and repatriated back through the tribal organizations and the customs they have. It's only then, when that starts to happen, that we can start to move forward with the healing process that still has to take place here in the state of California towards California's first people.
Mm-hmm. COVID-19 has had a horrible effect on the state, and especially your district. It's one of the hardest hit areas in the state. How has the reopening of the economy in your area gone, and kind of what more can be done to help businesses kind of reopen in your area?
So specifically to the Assembly 40th District, I've met with leaders, business leaders, with the different chambers. Some have been creative and closing streets down, right, and bringing tents in and letting businesses move forward. I think there could be a better plan of working with the business community, right, to make sure, one, from the local government, right, the funding for those local governments comes from sales tax that then triangulates to the county government for parcel tax, that then the income tax, personal income tax, follows through to the state of California for the budgeting purposes. So in businesses in our district, they have been hit, particularly our small businesses with employees of anywhere from 100 to 25 employees. They have been hit very hard to make sure that they continue to have to pay that lease that's moving forward, to make sure that they're generating sales. And in some cases, some of those businesses have closed up. So we see that it truly is impacting our small businesses in the Assembly 40th District. We look forward to having the opening of the different tiers. Now we're at the point to where you can have outdoor seating, but we want to get to the point to where we can have that indoor seating with the safety and the precautions that go along with it. It's then that you're going to start to see the economy start to move forward. In our local area, we continue to bring forward business bills. The one in particular bill dealt with COVID-19, and small businesses with 25 employees or less that are opening up, that they would also be able to withstand any frivolous lawsuits that would be filed against them based on COVID-19. I introduced that bill last year. I'm reintroducing that bill again this year.
Kind of given your experience kind of being a tribal chairman, working with local governments, now being up here in the state, I guess, what have you learned from your previous experience that you've brought up here that you think would be beneficial to kind of help, change some things up here for the better?
I think, some of the discussions that take place sometimes includes the voice of the local government, from the community college to the experience on the county board of supervisors. And many times it leaves that void of that discussion being a part of the equation. I think when we talk about just right now businesses, if there's a way to engage that small business voice from the local community into the larger discussion of seeing the true effect of the decision making that happens at the state level that trickles down to the local level, right? I think that, and being able to have that voice here in the state legislature has helped out, along with our bills on mental health, our bills in seeing how mental health at the county board of supervisors, how our youth, particularly our homeless youth, those that are on the streets, how they're coping with these things that we see now. COVID-19 has only exacerbated the issue of our youth that continue to have lack of resources, not only in the Assembly 40th District, but throughout the state. If a youth now is having mental health issues, where do they go? Where do they go? Is there a hotline that they can call no matter where and get resources? So I have a bill that would establish for the first time in the state of California a hotline for suicide prevention to get those resources there, and also for our youth to make sure that they have resources. If they have to go to an area to get some medical attention, that there'll be some resources available to them. Currently, there's out of 58 counties, there's only about 47 of them have no resources at all for our youth. These are issues that we continue to champion, issues that I was successful in getting for the first time in the history of the state of California, Office of Suicide Prevention approved through the Assembly, the Senate, and the governor signed it into law. This year, I'm moving forward on budget requests to make sure that we have the funding for that office. But with everything going on, you can see the importance of making sure that our mental health and suicide prevention is something that stays at the top level when we're talking about reopening the economy. If we're talking about reopening the economy, opening businesses back up, and we're talking today about schools opening back up, how can we talk about even those two components if we're not willing to dive in and tackle the mental health components that go along with it?
It's very interesting kind of to touch on is the budget, was unveiled earlier this January. Kind of what are some of the aspects that you're looking for to get funding to kind of secure for some of the programs for the 40th Assembly District that kind of you're looking to secure here coming up in the May revise?
Certainly here in the May revise, but we're dealing with a lot of issues now, right? With trailer bills and those things that we voted on some last week and potentially on Thursday. But making sure that right now that our district has the resources to be able to administer the vaccines to particularly communities that have been overlooked, meaning that sometimes not everyone's going to be able to get to a hospital or to a vaccine center. We're going to have to be able to create and get more funding for those mobile clinics that will go into the communities themselves and in particularly communities of color, and that includes the Native American population, to make sure that those vaccines are continuing to be administered through all in the Assembly 40th District. So being able to get resources to bring into our district. And I'm happy to say that the governor, I joined the governor in my district in Loma Linda University, to showcase the distribution that university has put forward in the community. And they have a mobile aspect where they're doing outreach, working with the local churches from the African American community to make sure that mobile vaccine is actually getting into the communities. So we had the pleasure of hosting the governor in our district here a couple of weeks ago.
Committee season is turning right around the corner here, March and April. Kind of what are some of the pieces of legislation you're working on right now, getting ready for committee and hopeful to get through the process this year?
Well, certainly we have tribal bills dealing with the Wampero Seta statute, but we're also looking at education, Indian education, to make sure that the 3rd and 4th grade, the 8th grade, 11th grade, that's already embedded continues to move forward. We have our small business bills that we continue to look at and to get those moving forward. There's another bill, AB 681, that deals with LPS data sharing. And that's the one that starts to collect the data for our youth that are out there needing mental resources, that hopefully will be able to collect that data and to advocate for more of a permanent structure for resources there, meaning that if someone needs to be in a bed or getting more medical treatment, that they're going to be able to do that. I worked on that as a county supervisor for crisis stabilization units in my district when I was county supervisor for the 3rd district out in Joshua Tree. We had a 12-bed crisis stabilization unit successfully got funding and was constructed, and that created 12 beds to make sure that people that were going through some type of mental health issue was able to go there and to be stabilized with the resources there with professionals in the health profession. We continue to look at a lot of those cases there. So we're looking forward to our committees to move forward, our bill package to start to move forward. Last session, because of COVID-19, we were asked to reduce our bill load. So some of these bills are bills that we carried over from the last session.
And I guess how is this session going? You guys got used to the protocols a little bit last year. How is it going this session? Are you able to, I guess, talk with your other members freely, or are you guys still mostly kind of distant and kind of doing things online a bit?
Certainly, the speaker and rules on which we sit on have established a protocol for the legislature to follow. Testing, making sure that PPE, safe distance is being done. However, we are able to still converse with our legislative partners, right, and to make sure, and the other legislators to talk about the issues that we have. Many times it's on Zoom, but we're adjusting because it is an issue, right, that we have to continue to be that role model to make sure that safety precautions are being done, that we maintain that 6 feet distance, that we continue to move forward with PPEs in our area. It's kind of challenging, but we have to do it.
Right. And kind of, we kind of touched upon this a bit earlier, but I guess, given your experience, you were talking about how you first came up here in the late 90s, early 2000s. I guess has your perspective changed at all now that you've been up here in Sacramento for 2 years on kind of, how to do your job and how things can get done up here in Sacramento?
I was just on a call with some tribal leaders on last night, and every moment that I get to push for more California Indian people to get elected into these positions, from the local level to the state, federal, and who knows, executive office maybe one day. And when I talk about the tribal government, we went from basically building an infrastructure, from basically now urban planning, I guess you could call it, to being successful, to create a home loan program, to build infrastructure and roads when we had dirt roads, right? And all those things. I think tribal leaders, and in particular chairs and council members, are well equipped to take on the task of being a state legislator. It's just making sure that road is clear. And many times in Indian country, that road has many obstacles in front of it, even to voting rights, even making sure that people, Native American people from California, are even partaking in the voting aspect because of obstacles that are there. Some reservations have to travel 2 to 3 hours just to get to a food market. And now you put that together with voting, right? There's a problem. So another bill that I moved forward, 2314, that got signed into law with Secretary Alex Padilla, now U.S. Senator. We got that bill signed by the governor, and now I look forward to working with Secretary Weber to make sure that we have that task force reaching out to Indian country here in the state of California to promote two things: to promote more voting and to make sure that people understand that you're well equipped to sit in the seats here in the state legislature. If you dream to be from a California Indian tribe, to sit in the state legislature, we're living proof that you can do it, right? And we want to take that message back to Indian country, because in 2021, I cannot be the only California Indian elected in the state legislature. I look forward to seeing a day to where we have more California Indian people elected.
You have your own caucus.
Shaping the state of California in a caucus.
Yeah.
I'm glad you bring that up.
Well said. Well, Assemblymember Ramos, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to speak with us today. I guess, is there anything else you want to get out there before we go?
I think, one thing that we need to do is when we talk about Juan Pedro Serra and the destruction to California Indian people, we have to bring that up and honor our ancestors from all California Indian tribes that put their lives on the line for us to be here today, to be called California Indian people. Some went through a horrific history in the state of California with genocide and bounties put out on their souls so that we could be here today. And it's up to us, California Indian people, and myself in particular, to make sure that that voice is being heard and to be able to tell the state of California what truly happened to the California Indian people.
No, that's right. I guess, is there any books or reading material you could help provide the listeners to where they could learn more about this?
Well, certainly. Cross and Thorns is a book that's out there, as well as Benjamin Madley's book, American Genocide. It's well written and from an education and a scholastic type of approach. Because many times in my district and in my reservation, we suffered a 32-day battle in the San Bernardino Mountains, where a militia was formed in 1866 to go into the mountains to rid the mountains of all Indian people. That's where our clan, the Yohaviatham clan, dwindled down to less than 30 members because the militia went into the mountains and shot and killed any Indian they would see on sight. So our clan was almost wiped off this earth. Wow. Those are things that we've been talking about. But then when someone else writes about it from a scholastic approach, somehow that validates the discussion. And that's what Benjamin Madley has done with his book, with American Genocide. These atrocities that I talk about aren't something that we just say. These are things that our culture, from where I'm from, tells us what truly happened to our ancestors. And it's to them that we dedicate all this work to make sure that their voice is being heard here in 2021.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for bringing this to light, and hopefully we can bring this forward and educate more and learn more about the history. So thank you so much, Assemblymember Ramos, and we look forward to talking to you again later in the year as these things progress.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking interest in this story.
All right. Thanks. Have a good one.
Uh-huh.